My sister-in-law falsely accused me of child abandonment after 3 years of free help, but when she dumped her kids on my sick mother, I gave her a taste of her own medicine and destroyed her marriage. I'm 28 years old. I work with children professionally in early childhood education, and what happened with my sister-in-law, Courtney, basically destroyed any chance of having a normal relationship with my brother James and almost killed my mother in the process. The thing is that for 3 years we had a perfect childcare arrangement. I mean, I thought it was perfect. And then she literally called the police and accused me of child abandonment because I didn't see a text message in time. Can you believe it? 3 years of helping each other out, and she decided to ruin everything in a second because she's a toxic and manipulative person who can't accept responsibility for anything in her life. Let me back up a bit so you understand how we got to that point. It all started in March 2020, when the whole world went to shit with the pandemic and we were all trying to figure out how to keep working while taking care of our kids. Courtney and I had kids around the same age. She had 2 and I had 1 at the time, and we both needed to work. So we came up with this idea of taking turns watching the kids. Like I'd watch them 3 days a week and she'd watch them the other 2. Or something like that. We'd adjust according to our schedules. Honestly, it worked amazingly for years. I mean, I thought we were like a team, that we were helping each other survive all that craziness. My job is with children anyway. I work at an early childhood education center and I have all the certifications and training and all that. So, for me, it wasn't that hard to have some extra kids at home. Courtney worked in sales or something. I don't remember exactly what she did, but the point is that we both worked and we both needed the arrangement. The kids got along well, they played together, it was like having cousins around all the time, My mom would sometimes help us too when one of us had an emergency or something, but she has her own health problems, so we didn't want to abuse her time. During those 3 years, there were weird moments with Courtney. I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes she was a bit strange about certain things, like she'd get upset if I fed her kids something she didn't approve of, or if I didn't put exactly the clothes on them that she wanted. Stuff like that. I always thought it was just because she was a bit controlling. Some moms are like that, and it's fine. Everyone raises their kids how they want. James, my brother, never said anything about Courtney, always defended her in everything, which should have been a giant red flag, but I didn't pay attention because, well, he's my brother. And supposedly you support your family. Things got ugly in January of this year. Courtney and I had a super silly argument about I don't even know what. Honestly, I don't even remember what it was about because it was so insignificant. Like maybe I said something about the bedtime routine or she didn't like how I handled something with the kids. It literally doesn't matter because it was stupid. But apparently for her it mattered a whole lot because she decided to use it as an excuse for everything that came after. It was a normal Tuesday, like 7 in the morning, and I was rushing trying to leave the house to take the kids to Courtney's before heading to work. I had my son in the back seat plus her 2 kids that I had picked up the day before because she had worked late, the normal chaos of mornings with small children. I grabbed my phone quick to check the weather or something, but I didn't look at messages because I was literally driving and trying to get the kids to stop fighting in the back seat. And one of them was crying because he wanted his teddy bear that had been left at my house. I mean, it was one of those moments where you have to juggle 1,000 things at once. I got to Courtney's house around 7:30. The kids got out of the car with their backpacks and their lunch boxes, and I walked them to the door. I rang the doorbell a couple of times, waited a moment, and since Courtney didn't come out, I assumed she was in the bathroom or something, so I left the kids on the porch because they had been there 1,000 times before. They knew the house perfectly, and I rushed off to work because I was already running late. What I didn't know, because I hadn't checked my phone, is that Courtney had sent me a message around 6 in the morning saying she wasn't going to watch the kids that day. She didn't even call me. You know what I mean? She just sent a text and expected me to magically see it, while I was busy getting 3 kids ready to leave the house. So, when I got to work like 15 minutes later, I started getting calls like crazy from a number I didn't know. And when I finally answered, it was the police telling me I needed to get back to my sister-in-law's house immediately. The panic I felt in that moment, oh my God. I felt like I was going to have a heart attack right there in the work parking lot. I thought something horrible had happened to the kids, that maybe there was an accident or something worse. And I drove back to Courtney's, probably breaking like 20 traffic laws. When I arrived, there were 2 patrol cars with their lights flashing. The neighbors were all outside watching, and the 3 kids were sitting on the porch crying and terrified because there were police officers everywhere. Courtney was standing there at the entrance with her arms crossed, looking at me with this satisfied face that I'll never forget, like she had won something. One of the officers came up to me and asked if I was Victoria, and when I said yes, he explained that they had received a call about child abandonment, that apparently I had left 3 minor children on the porch of a house without adult supervision. I just stood there like an idiot trying to process what was happening. Because seriously? Seriously? Courtney called the police instead of just calling me on the phone like a normal person? I explained the whole situation to the officer, showed him the messages from the last 3 years where Courtney and I coordinated childcare, explained that I hadn't seen her message that morning because I was busy, and he looked increasingly annoyed, but not at me, at Courtney. The other officer was talking to her, and basically she admitted that she had sent the message only an hour and a half ago, that she knew I probably hadn't seen it, but that she decided to call the police anyway instead of solving the problem like adults. The officers ended up telling Courtney that this was clearly a communication issue and not a real case of child abandonment, that she had wasted police resources on a family dispute, and that if she had problems with her sister-in-law, she should resolve them as a family instead of involving the police department. One of them told me quietly that they weren't going to file any report because it was obvious this was a manipulated situation, but to be careful with my sister-in-law because clearly she wasn't acting in good faith. No shit. Officer, I figured that out. I grabbed all 3 kids, put them in my car without saying a single word to Courtney, and left. I took them to my house, called work to say I had a family emergency and wasn't going to be able to come in that day, and sat on my living room floor trying not to have a complete nervous breakdown while the kids played with blocks like nothing had happened. You know what hurt the most? That she knew that calling the police and accusing me of child abandonment could have completely ruined my career. I work with children. I need to have a clean record. Any accusation like that, even if false, could get me fired or lose my certifications, and she didn't care one bit. That night, James called me, and I thought he was going to apologize on behalf of his wife or something. But no, the asshole called me to tell me I was overreacting, that Courtney was just worried about the kids' safety, that I should have checked my messages. I told him his wife is a manipulative psychopath and that never again in my life was I going to watch his kids even for a second. And he started with the guilt trip about how we're family and they needed help and blah, blah, blah. I hung up on him and blocked Courtney from everything. Phone, social media, messages, everything. Like a week later, James called me again from another number, and this time he was more desperate. He told me that Courtney had to quit her job because they didn't have anyone to watch the kids now that I wasn't available, that daycares were super expensive and they couldn't afford one, that I was being selfish and ruining my nephews' lives. I asked him if he was joking. Reminded him that his wife literally called the police to try to ruin my life and my career, and he said something like, she was just scared and reacted badly. Scared of what? And that I left the kids at her house where she was. Supposed to be watching them? Give me a break. I thought that was the end of it, you know, that they would manage on their own like the responsible adults they supposedly were. But no, oh no, because Courtney is incapable of accepting the consequences of her own actions. Turns out that after quitting her job, she started taking her 2 kids to my mom's house 3 days a week. 3 days a week. Without properly asking permission, without offering to pay her. She just showed up with the kids in the morning and said something about having doctor's appointments or errands or whatever, and my mom, who is too good for her own good, let them take advantage of her. My mom is like 60 years old and isn't in the best health. She has problems with blood pressure, and the doctor has told her 1,000 times that she needs to reduce stress in her life. Taking care of 2 small and energetic kids 3 full days a week is definitely not reducing stress. But she never says no to anyone, especially not to family. I didn't find out about this until like a month later when I went to visit her and found her exhausted, pale, looking 10 years older than she looked before. I asked her what was going on, and she finally told me that Courtney had been leaving the kids with her constantly, that she felt obligated to help because James is her son and those were her grandchildren too, but that honestly she couldn't take it anymore. She told me that her blood pressure had been super high at her last doctor's appointments, that she felt dizzy all the time, that she wasn't sleeping well from worry and exhaustion. And there I was, feeling like the worst daughter in the world, because I hadn't realized that Courtney had transferred her problem to my mom after I refused to keep being her free babysitter. That same day, I called James. I didn't even care that he had blocked me because I called from my mom's phone, and I left him a voicemail that probably lasted like 5 minutes of me yelling to him about everything I thought about him and his horrible wife. I told him that if Courtney left the kids with mom again, I was personally going to call the police for child abandonment just like she did to me. To tell his wife to get a job or sell something or figure it out somehow, but to stop manipulating and abusing our mother who is sick. And you know what? He didn't even respond. Nothing. Total silence. But Courtney kept taking the kids to mom's anyway. Like I hadn't said anything. Like the threats meant nothing. 2 weeks after that, my mom ended up in the hospital. Her blood pressure was so high that the doctor said she was at risk of a stroke, that she needed complete rest and zero stress or the consequences could be serious. I was in the emergency room with her when I got a message from Courtney asking if I could pick up the kids from mom's house because she had things to do. My hands were shaking as I responded to her. I told her that mom was in the hospital because of her, that she almost had a stroke from the stress she had caused her, and that if she ever left her kids with mom again, I was going to do everything possible to make sure the authorities knew what kind of negligent mother she was. She left me on red and didn't respond anything else. Mom was in the hospital for 2 days, and when she got out, the doctor gave her strict orders not to do anything stressful for at least a month. I told her she needed to tell Courtney she couldn't watch the kids anymore, that her health was more important than anyone's feelings. And she agreed, but I could see in her face that she felt guilty somehow, like she was the one failing the family when the reality was that Courtney was the one who had been abusing her kindness all this time. Mom talked to James and explained the situation, told him clearly that she couldn't keep watching the kids under doctor's orders. And he said he understood and was very sorry and they wouldn't bother her again. 2 days later, guess what happened? Courtney showed up at mom's house with the 2 kids, rang the doorbell, and when mom opened the door, told her she had an emergency and needed her to watch the kids just for a few hours. Mom told her she couldn't, that the doctor had specifically forbidden her from having that kind of stress, and Courtney literally left the kids there on the porch and drove away in her car. Mom called me crying, completely panicked, saying that Courtney had left and the kids were inside her house and she didn't know what to do. I told her to calm down, to watch the kids for the moment but not to do anything physically demanding, and that I was heading over immediately. Then I called Courtney and left her a very clear message. She had 1 hour to come back for her kids, or I was calling the police and reporting child abandonment exactly like she did to me. Just like she did to me, you know what I mean? Let's see how she felt on the other side. She didn't respond. The hour passed. I called the police non-emergency line and explained the complete situation. Told them that a woman had left her children with my mother, who had just gotten out of the hospital with orders not to have stress, that she had been explicitly told she couldn't leave the kids there, and that the woman had left anyway, over an hour ago, and wasn't responding to calls or messages. The officers arrived like 30 minutes later, took all the information, took photos of the messages where mom had told her she couldn't watch the kids, and stayed waiting for Courtney to come back. Courtney finally showed up like 3 hours after leaving them, all casual like nothing was wrong, and found 2 police officers on my mom's porch. They explained very clearly to her that leaving her children with someone who had explicitly expressed they couldn't care for them, especially someone with documented health problems, constituted child abandonment and neglect. They told her this was an official warning and that, if it happened again, there would be serious legal consequences, possibly involving Child Protective Services. Courtney's face was a mix of shock and fury. She was looking at me like I had committed some horrible crime by protecting my own mother. James arrived like 20 minutes later, also furious, yelling at me about how dare I call the police on his wife, that I was trying to destroy his family. I told him his wife had done exactly the same thing to me for much less, that maybe if she were a responsible mother and got appropriate childcare instead of manipulating and abusing family, none of this would be happening. He kept yelling, but the officers told him to calm down or they would have problems too. Things got even weirder after that. James started showing up at mom's house at odd hours, like at night or early in the morning, just to stay there in silence watching TV or drinking coffee. Mom told me that he and Courtney were fighting constantly, that their marriage was basically destroyed, that James was using mom's house as an escape because he couldn't stand being in his own house. Part of me felt sorry for him because he's my brother and I love him. But a bigger part thought this was exactly what he deserved for having allowed and defended Courtney's toxic behavior for so long. Courtney was apparently having complete meltdowns at home, yelling at James that everything was my fault, that I had ruined their lives, that without free childcare she couldn't work, and without her income they couldn't pay the bills. Like somehow I was responsible for their finances or their life decisions. James tried to talk to me once to see if we could fix things, and I told him very clearly that there was nothing to fix, that Courtney had crossed lines that can't be uncrossed, and that he had chosen to defend his manipulative wife instead of protecting his own mother who almost had a stroke because of them. Their financial situation deteriorated quickly, without the second income. They started falling behind on payments. James had to get a second job to try to compensate, which meant he was working all the time, and Courtney was alone with the kids feeling miserable and resentful, which only made everything worse. Mom would tell me things that James told her, that Courtney blamed him for not making enough money, that they fought about literally everything, that the kids were seeing and hearing all these horrible fights. Like 6 months after all the drama with the police, James called me to tell me that he and Courtney were moving back in with her parents, who lived like 4 hours away. They were going to leave their house, their life here, everything, because they couldn't maintain their current situation. He told me this, like he expected me to feel guilty or try to convince them to stay, but honestly, I only felt relief. Relief that they were finally going to be away from Mom, that she could recover her health and peace without having to worry about them. I didn't talk to Courtney at all before they left. She didn't try to contact me either. James said goodbye to Mom, cried a little, said that things could have been different if I hadn't been so hard on Courtney. And Mom just hugged him without saying anything because she's never going to stop being a mom even when her kids are being idiots. I didn't go say goodbye. I didn't see any reason to pretend I cared about their situation when they clearly never cared about how their actions affected the rest of us. It's been like 8 months since they left, and the difference in Mom is incredible. Her blood pressure went back to normal numbers. She's sleeping well, has energy again, looks 10 years younger. She visits often to spend time with my son, but on her terms, when she wants to, without pressure or manipulation. Sometimes she mentions James and asks how things are going over there with Courtney's parents, but never in a way that sounds like she misses all that chaos. I haven't talked to James since he moved. I don't have his new number. He doesn't have mine, and honestly, that's fine. I don't have social media where he can contact me. I blocked everything a long time ago. Mom tells me things occasionally, that apparently things are still difficult between him and Courtney, that her parents are helping them with the kids, but are also fed up with the situation, that Courtney still isn't working, because according to her, she can't find something that pays enough to justify the cost of daycare. Do I feel bad about how everything ended? Sometimes. Like when I think about the kids who aren't to blame for any of this, and are probably growing up in a shitty environment full of fights and resentment. But do I regret having set boundaries and protected my mom? Not for a second. Courtney is the type of person who's going to keep abusing others' kindness until someone puts a stop to it. And apparently I had to be that person because no one else in the family was willing to do it. What bothers me most is that James never, not once, admitted that Courtney was wrong or apologized for how she treated everyone. It was always defending her, justifying her, acting like everyone else was the bad guy for not wanting to be manipulated and used. And that's what really destroyed our relationship as siblings, not the drama with the kids or the police, but the fact that he chose a toxic woman over his own family over and over again until there was no family left to choose. My mom says that maybe someday things will calm down and we can reconnect as a family. That time heals all wounds and those things that moms say. But I don't know if I want that. Honestly, I don't know if I want those people in my life again, with their drama and their inability to take responsibility for anything. For now, I'm fine with my quiet life, with my son, with my mom who's healthy and happy, and without having to deal with the toxicity that Courtney brings to everything she touches. And if that makes me the bad guy in the version they tell, well, so be it. At least I can sleep peacefully knowing I did the right thing.